mighty phantoms of the evening sky. To whom do these celestial steeds belong, when you appear to us like gods on high? What brings you here to mystify?
Hi, and welcome to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Today's show has been pre-recorded. Two of my very good friends have kindly agreed to call in to share their thoughts with us. They are Kristen, an IT specialist, and Fahrusha, a noted New York psychic and author of a most interesting blog, who has been on our show before. I'm going to be speaking to Kristen first. Kristen, thank you so much for being here tonight and taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
Okay. I think the first thing I'd like to speak to you about is the fact that you are not a lifelong, you don't have a lifelong interest in ufology. You came about it sort of midway through.
That's correct.
And, I know our audience would love to know about that whole experience you had with your brother. And so if you don't mind, you can go ahead and fill us in on that.
Sure. Well, it was a late August barbecue in the summer of 2007. It was about 6 p.m., and I noticed something moving along the tree line. Looked up, was not really willing to believe what I saw, so I asked my brother to look up and to verify what I was looking at. And sure enough, he validated that what we were looking at was a rust-brown disk floating along in the sky in a straight path, no sound, no noise, very broad daylight, no clouds, nothing to diffuse the visibility. And ever since, I've been interested in ufology.
You became a believer. But, I find it interesting in your experience that you see in a lot of others is your brother's actually a professional photographer.
That's correct.
And he did not have a camera for this momentous event.
No, we were getting ready to enjoy some barbecue chicken.
It's so, it's like they catch you unawares on purpose. Now, about how big was this disc? Just roughly, I know.
Well, anywhere from 35 to 50 feet diameter, I would say.
So this was actually like a big thing.
Yeah. And what struck me more than anything was the fact that it was brown and it wasn't, the normal silverish green fawn color that people seem to say they see. This was a sort of a rust brown color, which surprised me.
Yeah, and no markings or lights or anything like that.
No markings, no lights, no noise. It was not a balloon. It was not an airplane. It drifted along a straight path between, if you're aware of northern New Jersey, northwestern New Jersey, between the Spruce Run and the, I believe it's the reservoir out, Round Valley Reservoir out in Hunterdon County.
Yeah. So obviously this really piqued your interest right away. And how did you follow up on it? There are a lot of people out there who became interested in ufology, whatever, and they don't really know what to do about it. How did you follow up on this?
Well, I had learned through some reruns of the X-Files, the organization called MUFON.
Uh-huh.
So I had contacted MUFON back in June, 2 months before I saw the object, and I followed up with them and wanted to become a field investigator. So, 4 months later, in November, I became a field investigator for MUFON.
And a very good one, too. So, now you have, yours is not just sort of a philosophical interest in this. You have a very mathematical bent to your personality. You like to get things down in numbers and bits and quantify things. That's correct, right? Would you say?
That's correct, and what I need to do is I need to be able to corroborate. Luckily, with my brother being there during that sighting, obviously I was able to corroborate exactly what I was looking at with him. But yeah, I look at the analytical, I look at the science, and I'm looking to prove out the mysterious.
And so how did you think, I know you tabulated a lot of results, but how did it occur to you to do that? I mean, other people have gone about it in different ways. They'll classify, what type of a sighting it was, but you actually did it, I may be mistaken, geographically to some extent?
Yeah, well, I was actually lucky. I was part of MUFON's STAR team, and I had access to their database, so I essentially took an extract of all of their sightings from the year 2000 to 2009, and using my Microsoft Excel skills and data skills, I essentially created some reports identifying the statistical probability of events by state and territory for 10 years, and I found some interesting findings.
Now, you got that information from STAR. I just go over quickly for the audience, if you don't mind, what STAR was all about.
Well, the MUFON STAR team was essentially created to investigate high-profile cases that hit the news, like the Stevensville, Texas event, or the Morris County Lights event that occurred back in 2009. I actually investigated that case.
Yeah, you found out all about it too. That turned out to be a hoax, I believe, right? That was the Chinese lantern one.
That's correct.
Yeah, good work, Kristen. You really. But see, that's why I think people using your sort of approach really get down to it. But so the STAR team gave you all their information. Had anyone else in the STAR team done anything like that?
No, I don't think it had ever been done before. I think it's just the fact that I had the analytical experience, the background for it, and I was able to get an extract of the data from the database, and I figured, well, let's see. A lot of times we collect all kinds of data, but we never really seem to make sense of it. So I thought, well, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah. So what kind of conclusions did you come up with?
Well, one of the most interesting findings was that essentially 67% of the cases seem to be in the identifiable range, airplanes, planets, things of that nature. Some of the odd facts that came out of the data was the fact that based on the benchmarks for best investigators, I found that Massachusetts had the best investigators.
Huh. Interesting.
What? Their findings were along the lines of the benchmarks. Okay.
Any reason for that, you think, or just that maybe that crew had a little bit more interest in it, or a little bit more support available to them?
I think they just had a little more experience, and based on the fact that they were in the Northeast area, having more of a analytical background, I think that they called it right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but it's still, even with analyzing all that data, it still wasn't possible for you to draw too many conclusions.
No, there's always that 1% probability that someone has seen something, such as myself, that you can't explain, you can't make sense of it, you can't, you don't have any radar data or anything like that. People see things, and you just have to have that open mind.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Open minds sometimes are a little difficult to find. I think we both know that. But now, if somebody else became interested in this, what kind of a background would they need to do that type of investigation?
Well, I think they need to be, number one, they need to be skeptical. Number two, they need to have an open mind. Those two things seem to go against each other, but as long as you look at it from a scientific perspective, I think if you approach it objectively, I think you could do a very good job. If you're subjective and you're one of those I want to believe, I would suggest that you don't get involved because you're going to be subject to bias.
Okay. Well, I tell you, we need to take a short break at this time. This is Kate Valentine on 1160 WVNJ, and I'm speaking with Kristen, who is an IT specialist and who has a sufficient background to do this type of investigation. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Welcome back to the Kate Valentine Show. We're speaking with Kristen. She is an IT specialist and has, through really excellent investigative abilities, come up with some fairly interesting conclusions. Kristen, if you were going to do it differently at this point to follow up on these investigations, have you started to improve on your methods, or would you have you sort of given it up at this time?
No, actually, I had left the MUFON and joined another organization. Although it has not been a very active organization, I am still interested in ufology as a whole. In fact, I have a LinkedIn group called Ufology. Do you believe? And I have some conversations online regarding ufology as well.
Okay. Now, I think your how would I put this nicely? Your solid sense of skepticism sort of rubs some people the wrong way. Is that correct?
Yes, I can vouch for that. In fact, I think that's why I had some difficulties and essentially resigned from one organization, because I think they were more of trying to keep the hype of UFOs and not looking at the scientific perspective of it. I've got a couple of cases that really honed in on the fact that someone took a picture of something, reported it as being a UFO, and I was able to actually take a picture of the same exact area that they took the picture of, was able to see the same exact thing about a month later that they saw, and was able to debunk their sighting.
Well, how many people do you think follow up as thoroughly as you do on sightings?
I don't think too many.
It's one of the reasons is that it just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Well, as long as you've got a good case, and I think as long as you've got a witness that you believe is seeing something substantial, that it's worth the time and investment. A lot of the cases that I've investigated turned out to be witnesses that themselves did not seem to be able to substantiate the case itself. They were a clear hoax.
Yeah. But one of the frustrating things about these investigations, for example, you had a solid sighting, and regardless of what anybody else will tell you about it, you certainly believe you and your brother had this solid sighting. Now, what do you do with it? That's the follow-up question. That's the hard part.
Well, you always wonder about those things. You always, you wish you did have the camera. You wish you did have the video that you could have taken that and had something substantial. You just have to go by what you saw. And, like I said, I was able to corroborate it with my brother standing there. He saw the same thing. He was as astonished as I was. And you just got to move on from there and hope that someday you can substantiate a real sighting.
Now, have you, in all your investigations and all the reports that were available to you, have you come across anything similar to your sighting?
I would say I've investigated about 100 cases, and maybe 2 cases out of the 100 seem to be real possibilities of something out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm. And it's so hard for people, and sometimes, you say that they're hoaxers, but they're not actually hoaxers. People just really make mistakes, honest mistakes.
Well, that's correct. Whether that's planets, whether that's some sort of natural phenomenon, or whether that's a mistaken aircraft, it's very easy. If the weather conditions are right, it can really fool you. Frequently they'll say, oh, they saw the planet Venus. And I thought to myself, well, that's ridiculous. How could you mistake Venus for a flying saucer? And then we had, there was a time when Venus was very close to the Earth and very low on the horizon and extremely bright. I think it was like a -4 magnitude. And I was looking at it, and there was a small wind. The breezes were blowing the trees. And I could see at that time how you could mistake that for a UFO. I finally
put some credence into the Venus explanations. Swamp gas is still out there for me.
Well, you hear a lot of stories about orbs. I actually twice investigated cases on that area, and like I said, there is natural phenomenon that normally the average everyday person doesn't experience. But when you have that odd circumstance, physics doesn't lie, and you can see some pretty interesting things.
Yeah. And so you've continued to run investigations and so on. Are you still tabulating findings, or is that sort of at a standstill at this point?
At this point, it's at a standstill. The organization that I'm now associated with has been pretty quiet. Things have been pretty quiet here in the Northeast. I cover the New Jersey area, and there hasn't been much activity reported. But I'm ready, willing, and able to re-engage at any time.
Okay, can you tell us about this new organization, or is that closed membership?
No. Actually, when I left MUFON, I joined EPIC, who is headed by Ken Cherry. They're located in Texas, but they have expanded their horizons, and I am their New Jersey representative.
Now, he was sort of famous for investigating the Stephenville incident. Mark Sema was on last week discussing that. And now Ken Cherry was given a lot of very well-deserved kudos for the investigative work he did on that incident.
Yes, he did a very good job. In fact, that was one of the reasons that gravitated me towards joining his organization when I left MUFON.
And did he come to any conclusion at all from all those lights? I mean, obviously people saw something that flew overhead. It was 10 miles south of the Bush Ranch. It's a very interesting incident and recent, and it's recent too. This is not like 3 decades ago. Did he come to any conclusion or any ideas from it?
I don't believe they actually closed the case on that, but my estimation would be that would probably be military aircraft because of the location of the sighting.
Mm-hmm. Well, they did have military aircraft that chased it, right?
I believe so. I'm pretty sure that they had some radar contacts.
Yeah, because I think it was not explained that there was a radar blip that was not military, and that would correlate with what people were seeing. So it seems like there was indeed an unidentified craft in that area.
That's very possible. I have not looked into that case.
Yeah, and so New Jersey's been sort of quiet too in this area, huh? And nothing great coming around here.
No, pretty quiet. It's a highly populated area, and the probability of something extraordinary happening, if you were a visitor, you'd want to be cloak and dagger. You want to be hidden from the overall public, and which is sort of what makes my experience really interesting. Pretty rare experience, but I would say I wouldn't normally expect too much activity in this area.
Well, and you think it's just because they don't want to be exposed to large groups of people? Well, who knows? That's pure speculation. I'm sorry.
That's correct. It's speculation. But if you were to observe another civilization, you would probably not want to be out in the limelight, identifying yourself clearly, and subject yourself to hazards yourself.
Yeah. You've been looking into this for a long time. Do you have any thoughts or theories? I'll let you speculate. Come on, Kristen, you can do it.
Well, I would say that we live in a big, big universe, and, if you're a believer in panspermia, that life is everywhere, or not just here on Earth, that the possibility that we have been visited in the past, are being visited, or will be visited is very, very possible. And I think that we need to just keep an open mind that we could be watched at every moment here. And also, you have to look at the fact that ufology these days is certainly in the culture here in the United States. Hollywood has certainly made enough money off of the, UFO theme that I just think that you got to keep an open mind.
Now, if somebody asked me once, and they said, if you had your druthers and these UFOs could turn out to be anything that you wish them to, or would hope them to turn out to be, would you want them to be a natural phenomenon? Would you want them to be actual alien craft? And if they were alien craft, what would you like to happen? I know what I'd like, but what would you care for?
Well, I often have a theory of my own that we were placed here as an experiment.
Yeah.
When you look at the life forms on the planet, and you see a lot of the amazing things that are ancient, like pyramids and things of that nature, you sort of wonder how they built those things. So I would like to keep an open mind and say that there's a very good possibility that there are other forces at work here.
So you sort of go along with the ancient astronaut theories.
That's correct.
Yeah. There does seem to be an awful lot of smoke there. It seems like, I know they say, well, look, humans were just as intelligent then as they are now. They just didn't have the technology. But one of the most amazing things to me was reading about the Great Pyramid. And you hear about these things all the time. It's big, there's huge blocks, blah, blah, blah. When you actually read the description, the physical description, it seems like almost an impossible. If it didn't exist, you would say something of that nature could not exist.
Right.
And I think it's the same with UFOs. It's just like they are there. It's just that it's hard to believe that they are there.
That's right.
And but if it were an alien, what would you look for in an alien? I sort of hope it's something that you can communicate with, someone that's sort of on our level of technology, as opposed to a light being or one of the mythological type figures. I have a feeling you'd probably want someone that you could communicate with too.
Well, you would hope that whatever beings they are, if there are, visitors, that they would look at our civilization as a precious, isolated civilization in that vastness of space, and that we should be valued. And I think we're being observed more than anything.
It could be, especially when you think about it, is that this is an enormous universe, and as far as we know, and I mean, certainly there's a lot of questions about this, but as far as we know, today's humans are the only society of thinking animals that have developed a technology and a society, and it would have taken 4 billion years to do that on this planet, so that this type of life, this type of society probably is relatively rare in the universe.
Exactly, unless, like I said, we either evolved or we were placed here.
And if we were placed here, you think they're sort of keeping an eye on their experiment?
I would suggest that, yes.
Yeah, huh? Wow. Well, what happens if the experiment goes bad? Do you think there'll be any penalties?
I would hate to guess on that one.
Yeah, it probably would be a good thing, sort of comparable to the flood. I wonder if, whether that flood has been in so many mythologies and religious tracks that it seems that a large flood at one time did happen on this planet. And according to some of these religious writings, it was done to wipe out the bad people that were on the planet at this time. Let's hope that this generation, this experiment, did a lot better than the last one.
Well, let's hope that we, every civilization that has the ability to destroy themselves has to be careful that they don't do that.
Yeah. Well, any hope in the future for us, do you think? Do you think there may be a bright ending to all this?
Well, I just hope that one day we wake up and say, look what we're doing to our environment. look what we're doing. We need to change our ways, and we need to make sure that we invest in our future and not look for just today.
Well, I'll tell you, Kristen, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. And we're going to be taking a quick commercial break, and we'll be back to the second half. With joining us will be Fahrusha, New York's favorite psychic. So we'll be speaking to you soon. Hang on. Be right back after a short break. Welcome back to the second half of the Kate Valentine UFO Show at 1160 WVNJ. Joining us now is Fahrusha, New York's favorite psychic. Fahrusha also publishes a most interesting blog, and we will be discussing that blog right now. Welcome to the show, Fahrusha. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on again, Kate.
Oh, it's always fun. I love your blogs. You read them and then you spend the next hour and a half thinking about them, and they're great. They're fun. And as I mentioned to you last night, I thought that the last one that you published, the February 9th, 2013, was especially interesting and quite timely. It's entitled "An Asteroid and Two Comets." Oh boy! So it's cool. So what about this asteroid now? You want to tell us about this little bad boy?
Yeah. Well, the thing about I want to say one thing about all of these celestial objects that are coming towards us on some level, and the interesting thing about all of them is that they were only discovered within the past year or so. And that is kind of weird in and of itself. Now, the asteroid has got a very exciting name, DA-14.
Wow.
And they only found it, I think last year at this time. They only discovered that it would be even coming here. And we're still determining its flight plan, I would say a couple of weeks ago. So it's going to be coming on Friday, depending on what time, what time zone you're in. I think, and I've seen two different write-ups on this. One write-up said it was coming past here at about 5 in the morning, and the other one said 2 o'clock in the afternoon it's going to fly over the Indian Ocean. And that seemed to be the more definitive one in terms of, the possibility that it wasn't a definitive website that I read it on. I would like to be able to cite what website it was, but I can't do that right at the minute.
That's okay. I just want to point out, in the interest of full disclosure, that this is a pre-recorded show. It will be playing on Friday, February 15th, and Fahrusha and I will not be there. So I'm wishing you all the best in the New York area, should it strike.
But yeah, it's not expected to strike New York. I think that they have calculated fairly well that it will be going over the Indian Ocean at its closest point to the Earth.
And
that's
that's just like 17,000 feet. That's within satellite range.
It's under the satellites. It's going to come as close as 2 Earth diameters. So I don't know, 17,000 feet, maybe 17,000 miles is more like it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course, you're right. Yeah. Sorry. Oops.
I'm not real good with numbers.
Oh, miles, feet.
Yeah. Hey, what's the diff? But it's much closer will be coming much closer to the Earth than the Moon is.
Yeah.
And it is a large object. They estimate it to be about the size of the object that hit the Russian Siberian area, the Tunguska event, which happened in 1908, and brought down thousands of miles of trees in a circular radius.
Yeah, they were saying if that had hit a major city, it would have been a total disaster. I mean, really a major disaster.
The interesting thing about the Tunguska is that it didn't hit. It exploded overhead.
Oh, really?
Yes, and this I was reading about recently, since I even wrote the blog the other day. So, should this thing blow up overhead, it'll be a bad scene, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, these things have to just keep on going. I mean, wish them well and, cheer them on their way, and that's it.
Yes, we need to hope that that the NASA astronauts were right, and I do believe that they're very accurate with calculating the kind of orbits of these things and the kind of trajectory that they're on. The only thing that I am concerned about is how do they know the weight of this object? They assume it to be a silica object.
Okay.
But it's an assumption. I don't know. That's the part that scares me.
So if it were lighter or heavier, that would throw the path off.
I think.
Yeah, I would think so, too.
I think.
Yeah. Ooh. Well, let's hope they're right, but the interesting thing about this is now a lot of conspiracy theorists would say that if it actually were going to hit, the government would not release that information for fear of panic in the streets. So the fact that they have released it probably indicates that they're quite certain it will not have any immediate effect. But there's a lot of speculations that it may affect the satellites themselves and interfere with communications and weather and that sort of thing.
That would be unfortunate, but it would be relatively minor compared to an explosion that might have, the type of which might have wiped out the dinosaurs years back. But I think it's a smaller object than that, actually.
Yeah, I think so too.
I can't say the name of that crater and the name of the asteroid that hit. It's Chicxulub or something like that.
Oh,
the one that
Chicxulub, I think.
Okay.
Chicxulub.
Okay.
That's the one right off Mexico.
Right.
Yeah, that. But I think that was a much larger asteroid too.
It was a larger object. Yes.
Yeah. Well, supposedly there is some talk about John Ventry is quite concerned about Apophis, and I hope I'm finally pronouncing it correctly.
Sounds good to me.
And that's a humdinger of, and that's coming back in 2 years. It did do a pass by, I think, about a year or so ago, and that was 26,000 miles above Earth, but this one is supposed to become much closer than the 17,000 mile range. So these are things,
boy.
Yeah. And but now you point out that now all of a sudden we're seeing a lot more of these objects, more comets, more asteroids, and in your blog you say that, of course our abilities to find them with telescopes and so on is far more advanced than it was even 20 years ago. But
yes.
But you speculate on other reasons too, which I think you should bring out to the audience. Very interesting.
I certainly will. Well, the thing is that with asteroids, we do have a better chance to see them when they're further away. Much better optical instruments. However, the thing is with the comets. Because we wouldn't know, sitting here on Earth, unless we were astronomers, we wouldn't know what asteroids are passing by and what asteroids aren't. But the comets are different. Not all comets will produce a very big show, a big coma, a tail behind them. But they're predicting actually two comets that will be visible to the naked eye for the northern hemisphere in 2013, and there is already one in the southern hemisphere that has, I think it might be slightly visible now, but it will be visible around the same time Pan-STARRS is supposed to be visible here. Comet Lemon is visible in the southern hemisphere. And last year, the Southern Hemisphere had Comet Garrod and Comet Lovejoy. So there's been a whole lot of these comets. Now, I don't know, I've been on this planet a few more years than I'd like to admit to. Okay. And I've always been interested in astronomy. I've always had like a kind of a native interest in the stars and the moon and watching it and everything. So in my whole life, I think there's only been 2 comets that I can recall that were visible.
Well,
2.
There was Kohoutek a while back, and then Halley's made another pass by, and then there was a third one. I forget. I can't think of its name offhand. But these are singular events, and they're years apart.
Right. There's more than 10 years between these things. Am I right?
Yeah. Oh, well, you remember the Phoenix Lights? One of the reasons so many people saw it was there was a comet over Phoenix at the time, and people were out stargazing, and then this craft flew over Phoenix.
Wow, yes.
So there was that. But that was recent now. What is that, like 4 or 5 years now ago? Or? No, it's 10. It was 10. I think it was 10.
Yeah, Phoenix Lights is 2000, year 2000. I don't recall, but it wasn't real recently. And it must have been a reasonably small comet because
it was.
I didn't see it. I didn't know about it. Okay, it's a different part of the sky they see down there, but it's not vastly different. Like it's not the southern hemisphere versus the northern hemisphere or something like that. So ostensibly, should that comet have been reasonably large, we should have seen it here as well, I would think.
Yeah, and I don't think it was that published. Even there, they had to go out with telescopes to see it, and binoculars.
It's telescopes, so it's wasn't a naked eye comet.
I don't think so. No, and again, listen, I'm talking off the top of my head. I definitely could be wrong.
And in 1986 was the last pass of Halley's Comet, and it was much less bright than the previous time. It comes by every 76 years. I was not here for the previous one.
Yeah. Well, I doubt if we're going to be seeing the next one either, but, you never know. The
interesting thing about the Southern Hemisphere, we don't know that. We could be. The Southern Hemisphere comet that's coming up or is already maybe slightly visible, maybe with the telescope or something, this Comet Lemon, is that it's a green comet, and it's got a lot of cyanide gas attached to it, which is what makes it green. Yeah. Which goes into the other aspect of comets, which is interesting. In March, we've got Comet Pan-STARRS coming overhead from out of the Oort cloud. And then I think in the fall, we have what could be the biggest comet they're saying it could be the biggest comet of the century. I don't know that that's necessarily the truth, but that's what they're telling us, and that is Comet Ison. Now, comets are unpredictable. Scientists haven't got the capacity to predict how much of the gases will be ignited by their close passage to the sun.
Well, I'll tell you, we have to take a quick commercial break right now. This is Kate Valentine. We're on 1160 WVNJ, and I am speaking with Fahrusha, New York's favorite psychic. We will be right back after a short break discussing comet dust at that time. Be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Joining us now is Fahrusha, New York's favorite psychic, also the publisher of a most interesting blog, and one that we're going to be talking about right now, her February 9th, 2013 blog. Fahrusha, just before we get into it, how can people find your blog, or how do they find out about you? What's your best website?
Okay, my blog is fahrusha.wordpress.com, and my commercial website is Fahrusha.com, the same thing, fahrusha.com. That sort of details the services that I provide, whereas the WordPress blog is my writings.
Okay, well, just before the break, we were talking about the comet dust and how it gets ignited on its passage by the sun. But you brought up something even more interesting, and that was panspermia. And,
Yes.
And I had not known this. On your blog it said, and let me see if I can find it really quickly. But while they were investigating this tale, they found out that the only thing it could be would be biological.
Yes, the heat analysis from the dust of Halley's Comet, sometimes known as Halley's Comet, but whichever, the heat analysis that was done by the German scientists, I believe, with a Russian rocket, so everything's international these days. The heat analysis of the dust matched that of bacteria and nothing else.
Was that verified? Because I had never heard that discussed anywhere.
Well, you do notice, I think that there's something afoot scientifically or within, I hate to say it, perhaps within NASA, that is not pushing the idea of there being life in space. There's been a number of false starts. Back a couple of months ago, we were going to be told some great something about something that the rover found on Mars, and we were all waiting with bated breath, and nothing came out. Nothing.
Yeah. And they never sort of said, gee, I'm sorry, it was a false start. They just let it go. They
just dropped it. But although not every scientist adheres to the theory of panspermia, the theory of panspermia is that originally the theory simply states that life is spread out throughout the universe and, reasonably abundant, and that it's throughout the universe. And that has been around since the time of the Greeks. More recently, the very famous astronomers, Fred Hoyle, who's reasonably recently deceased, Sir Fred Hoyle, and an Indian gentleman by the name of Chandra Wickrama Singh, I believe. I hope I'm saying it right.
That's good. That was good. That was good.
And they have come out with a theory about how viruses, lichens, spores, and bacteria could be carried from place to place in the universe by these space rocks and by these dirty snowballs that we call comets, because that's what a comet is. And what happens is that there's a lot of folklore about comets causing pandemics, and it's becoming possible that it might be true.
That was a terrific speculation on your part, and not even so much a speculation, but just a follow through on these facts. I love this, that you brought this out.
Well, you can thank Dr. Wickrama Singh and his current partner, whose name escapes me at the moment, Ron Shawn, or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. But Ron Joseph, R-H-A-W-N, Joseph, Dr. Ron Joseph. But the interesting thing about this theory of panspermia is that Stephen Hawking is an adherent.
Really?
Yes. I've just recently read about him, thinking that this is most likely the truth. The thing that we find out is that if you have an anaerobic bacteria, that they can live in space. You also have viruses, which may have a strong coating on them, and they've been seen to possibly live in space. They had an experiment with lichen which were put under Martian conditions, and they lived for 34 days. So it's very interesting. There are different ways that these small life forms can live in space and in the upper atmosphere. And actually, they've done a number of studies of the upper atmosphere, the stratosphere, and whatever is beyond, and they find that there's far more single-celled organisms and viruses and stuff of that nature, then you would expect there to be there, then would naturally should be occurring there. Now, this is somewhat scientific fact. I may be, off on a word or two, but this is basically what is going on. And if we pass through the dust of a comet, it is possible that we may be seeing some new different kinds of organisms come to Earth.
And then you cite the one example of Encke's comet, and
Yes.
followed by the Spanish influenza, which was a really horrible pandemic.
Yes, it was.
And then so that matches in with the all the ancient theories of comets bringing plague and destruction and so on.
The Journal of Cosmology has a lot of information on that, so I advise people who are really interested to read the blog and then click on my link to the Journal of Cosmology. And in that journal, in the article that they will get the Chandra Wickrama Singh article, and then there'll be more articles on panspermia that are very, very interesting, because there are more correlations between the Black Death and the Middle Ages and certain comets and so forth.
And you see on some of the old tapestries the picture of that comet going overhead and then people
Yes.
dying underneath it. And
Yes.
I tell you, it's not impossible that could happen. I would have thought in the past, no, that's ridiculous, but it does seem like it could be a very real possibility. This is Kate Valentine. We're speaking to Fahrusha. We're on 1160 WVNJ. And the other thing, too, with panspermia is, look at on this planet with the extremophiles.
Yes.
Life exists all over the place. And,
Yes, it does. And they discovered that a bacterial spore that is covered with dust could exist in space fairly indefinitely. And that remember I mentioned that the comets were really dirty snowballs?
Yes.
And the interior of the dirty snowball can provide a certain amount of protection for bacteria sometimes.
And it wouldn't dehydrate either.
No, no. But I think it's ice mostly, but I think that they're like in a dormant state when they're bacterial spores. But in any case, we shall see about this. But what I find very interesting, Kate, is that these are literally aliens coming to Earth, but maybe not the kind of aliens or UFOs we think about.
Oh, so you think the aliens come on comets, huh? Oh, that would be...
Well, I hate to mention the sad story of the gentleman who was on another radio show some years ago and mentioned that there was a spaceship.
Yeah.
He was a remote viewer, but he was not a government remote viewer, and he said that there was a spaceship behind not Halley's Comet, Hale-Bopp Comet.
Yeah.
And then a number of folks took their own lives. So,
yeah.
So I'm not suggesting anything like that. I'm only suggesting that some of the aliens might be very tiny, like single-celled organisms, and we think of grays and large Nordic types and kind of bicameral, bipedal aliens. And some of these aliens could be just little critters.
That would be really interesting because just a while back they found a bacteria that was arsenic-based, but I think that's been somewhat discredited just this year. But
that was out in the out in the Midwest. Wasn't the far? It was in.
I think it was California in some horrible lake, and they found bacteria there that used arsenic as part of their DNA. But it's been shown that. And again, who knows that supposedly it was shown that was not the case and that their initial investigation into those bacteria was mistaken. But
yes, they argue this back and forth, but we have found on Earth meteorites whose existence began on the Moon and on Mars. And with the Martian ones, there have been a number of scientists who say that there are bacteria contained in those Martian meteors, and scientists are arguing that there has been a water flow on Mars as recently as 5 years ago.
Well, they have the little rover up there on Mars that just recently, I think 2 days ago, drilled into a rock. And
Yes.
They're looking for, past water. And I think now its next object is to climb up to a mountain very slowly, because they feel that if there is any traces of life left, it'll be on top of a mountain.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess maybe if there was a huge flood, anything that survived it would have to be up high, I think.
There's a big ballyhoo about a small object about a centimeter big, which is a metallic object that looks like a handle on a door or some form of a protuberance. It's shiny. It has a high albedo, and it's different. It's sort of metallic looking compared to the rest of the scenery there, and nobody's given any real explanation for it. That doesn't mean that it's a sign of life, but it's very anomalous.
And every time something like that pops up, NASA hops right into it, goes, no, it's not that. Do you think that these things actually exist and that NASA covers them up, or do you think NASA's telling the truth?
I don't know. I think that at the very least, they want to be very conservative about it. That's the least, I think, that is going on, if you get my meaning.
And what would be the purpose in their covering that up? Do you have any idea? I mean, obviously you don't know. I don't know either. But do you?
Well, it goes back to the same. You can go back to the same theory about why are UFOs covered up.
Yeah.
The things that we see. The government wants you to believe, whatever large government it would be. It doesn't matter if it's